Hunter, I cannot hear you.
Sorry about that. I had some problems on my end.
Yes.
So hello, welcome to this ARA webinar with staff from the Council of Producers and Distributors of Agrochemicals titled Adjuvant Advantage for the Sales Agronomist. The goal of this webinar is to develop a uniform industry adjuvant education program for the ag retail industry to help growers understand how the selection and use of the proper adjuvant will improve their overall crop protection program, and is sponsored today by Brand. My name is Hunter Carpenter, Senior Director of Public Policy with ARA. I'll introduce our webinar speakers in just a bit, but first I wanted to go over a few things so you know what to expect. First, thank you for taking time to be with us today. Webinars are an extremely important part of the ARA development pathway and provide a great opportunity for ARA member companies to help educate their employees. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, but you can type them into the chat panel or Q&A function at any time. Today's webinar will be recorded, and that recording will be made available to the member-only section of the ARA website. And as a reminder, you can log into the member-only ARA dashboard to access this webinar and other past webinar recordings. And if you do not have an ARA login, but your company is a member, you can email info@aradc.org to set that up. So with that out of the way, I'm excited to introduce our speakers today. Johnny Roberts, Director of Education and Adjuvant Chemistry for CPDA, and Joe Janowski, Director of Education and Adjuvant Development at CPDA. Johnny has 45 years of experience in the development and technical support of pesticide, fertilizer, and adjuvant formulation. 44 of those years were spent with Helena Agri Enterprises. Johnny's also the co-inventor of 15 U.S. patents related to pesticide, adjuvant, and nutritional formulations. Joe has 40 years of experience in the development of adjuvants and spray application technology, 35 of which were spent with the legacy Winfield United companies. Joe holds 41 U.S. and international patents on the composition of new ag adjuvants, wind tunnel design, and application technology. He's also the author of numerous scientific publications on these topics. We would also like to acknowledge the CPDA Advisory Working Group for their work in putting together the series of webinars. They've helped on the planning side with these webinars and also helping put together material. So we want to thank them for their continued involvement with CPDA. You'll also be able to scan a QR code at the conclusion of today's webinar and receive 1 IPM CEU credit for your Certified Crop Advisor certification. So stay tuned for that QR code. We'll display that at the end. I now wanted to turn it over to Joe for some background on why today's webinar is so important and why CPDA has chosen today's topic. And we'll let Joe get started here and just let me know when to advance slides, Joe.
Okay, very good. First we're going to talk to, and I apologize for those that have been on the last time. We've talked about this Endangered Species Act, which the EPA is rapidly moving forward to increase buffer zones on our crop protection applications. And we're really, CPDA is really working hard to help mitigate those buffer zones, because we know what a handicap that is, especially in states where you have smaller fields and such. Virtually the buffer zone can encompass the entire field. And so it's important for job CPDA, ARA, Crop Life, and many of our corn growers, soybean growers are working hard to mitigate this. Next slide, please. So one of the tools that we have worked with the EPA a long time about is use of drift reduction adjuvants as a mitigation tool for extensive buffer zones. And they have proven that to work with the technologies like Enlist and dicamba, which both are using adjuvant systems to reduce their buffer zones drastically. So we are collaborating with many different spaces to try and do this with all drift and deposition agents for future buffer zones. Next slide, please. So we feel it's the right approach. Most of the drift reduction technology is available to all retailers. And so we know how to do these things. And so we're working hard to try and help EPA to mitigate these buffer zones. Next slide, please. So on that standpoint, what we're really looking for is ag retail at your locations, really push this forward up the pipeline, that this is an important way to help mitigate the future buffer zones around endangered species. So this slide is, we've covered these topics in the past, and we just wanted to remind everyone that these webinars are still on the ARA and CPDA websites. So if you're looking for more information on enhancers and utility adjuvant systems, a lot of that is covered in those webinars that you can go on to both ARA and CPDA websites and go back and review those. Next slide, please. So what we're talking about today are adjuvants and aerial applications. I do want to preface that neither Johnny and I are aerial application experts, but we have worked on systems to help benefit aerial applicators for many years. And so we're going to talk about what impacts may be managed by spray adjuvants. What are the applications with fungicides and how that can help, even though we're not worried about drift there, but deposition. And what are the types of DRA or deposition adjuvants that have proven successful? And then what are the spray mix application guidelines? So with that, Johnny, if you are able to get on, we'll turn this next section over to you.
Okay, I'm testing my audio now. Am I coming through?
Yes, sounds good.
Excellent. Well, we'll be working off of three resources today. The first one will be some guidelines that were published by the EPA, also leveraging against the excellent extension bulletin out of Purdue that deals with adjuvants and the power of the spray droplet. And then another document that was put together actually quite a few years ago dealing with spray adjuvants for herbicide drift control. This was published by the USDA Forestry Service. So we'll be leveraging off of those three documents. Next slide, please. So just some overall facts about aerial applications in the United States. There are more than 1,300 aerial application services using over 4,000 aircraft. 25% of all the crop protection products are being applied by air, with it predominantly going over corn, soybeans, pastures, and alfalfa. 100% of all the forest protection products are put out by air. And there's approximately 71 million acres overall that are treated aerially. So it's quite a big piece of the crop protection application business. Next slide, please. So what are some characteristics that are very typical? There's a low spray application volume applied per acre, 3 to 5 gallons. There's high levels of agitation, pump shear. But the big general guideline of what we're looking for is to improve and maintain the deposition of the applied spray. That is our major goal, both from an efficacy standpoint and a environmental and worker safety standpoint, keeping stuff on target. Next slide, please. So we have 3 application carriers: water, fertilizer, and oil. Water and fertilizer predominate here in the U.S. Oil applications are very narrow. They tend to be mosquito applications, those type of things. We're going to focus on water and fertilizer. Next slide, please. So some limitations for water-based aerial applications that we have to deal with. Foam and compatibility issues tend to be severe because of the high agitation and low spray volumes. there's a issue of poor coverage due to droplet bounce and the lack of volume that's being applied. Evaporation, this becomes a big issue, and it's a concern both during the application and while the spray deposit itself is on the target. And of course, a big issue, and that's one of creating driftable fines that can move off target and cause issues. Next slide, please. So what are the adjuvants that complement aerial applications that have been used today and historically? Well, we use crop oil concentrates, methylated seed oils, and high surfactant oil concentrates, generally as deposition aids. There are some materials that have strictly the function of evaporation reduction. There are others that have
Johnny, you're
compatibility and foam reduction agents as a fit. And then the biggest category of all this in this space is
Johnny, your audio is acting up again. Can you hear me?
Or DRAs. Breaking up?
Yes, you are again. I don't know what changed.
Okay. Can you hear me?
No, we can't.
Nope.
Hello?
You're breaking up again, Johnny.
I'm back again. I apologize. I apologize. It happens again. I'm gonna Oh, we can't. Okay.
Well, Johnny, you want me to take these over?
Okay.
Okay, because you're breaking up. He is on your end too, isn't he, Hunter?
That's correct. Please mute
Okay.
yourself, Johnny. Thank
Hello?
Okay, yeah.
So
I'll go.
I'm getting all kinds of signals here. It's not working.
Yeah. So I'll take over from
I'll do it. Sorry about that.
starting at okay. So Johnny talked about the crop oil concentrates, the high surfactant. So one of the real key factors in aerial application, just like in drones, because of the low spray volume and the smaller droplets, are materials that help reduce evaporation or humectants in the tank. And so that's a critical piece. And he also mentioned the compatibility in foaming agents also, because of, in many cases, you're putting just about as much active in the tank as you are carrier volume, whether that be water or fertilizer or whatever. And so the use of compatibility agents and foam reduction agents is a real critical piece of this. And then we also mentioned, we'll talk about the drift reduction or deposition aids are another often used factor in aerial spray applications. Next slide, please. So here's an example, a nice shot out of, I think, South Africa, actually. The difference between with and without a drift reduction type adjuvant. You see the nice even stream onto the left-hand plane, and then a more of a fog, so significantly smaller droplets coming out of the plane on the right. And these were identical applications, just with and without a drift and deposition agent. And I'm assuming this guy got above that tree, he's heading straight toward. Next slide, please. And this is a doesn't really apply to aerial, but it does show most drift deposition aids work through a wide number of nozzles. And Johnny and I don't tend to know all the different type nozzles that come out of aerial craft, but I know there's there's new developments in that space also that many people are looking at. So next slide, please. So we're really looking at on a 8-foot tall deal of corn. It's easy to cover the top of the corn plant, but to get the deposition down below is much harder. And this is what concentrating your droplets in a more favorable droplet size using a deposition aid can make a huge impact. And this is easy to demonstrate with, in this case, cards were used to show the difference to the adjuvant system on the right versus no adjuvant on the left. Next slide, please. Relatively recent use of adjuvants to improve distribution, retention of active ingredients through vegetative canopies. As we move over my career to a tremendous amount of fungicides being used in corn and soybeans and wheat compared to what it was early in my career, you really have to maximize that activity to stop resistant development. And that's what is the key part of this. Is to deposit as much as possible with fungicides. Herbicides is important. With fungicides, it's extremely important. And again, often these are also combined with foliar fertilizers. So next slide, please. And this is an example of some work done out of Nebraska. This was the Sugar Beet Association that did this. And you see the two different fungicides, one on the far left without an adjuvant system, and then 3 different drift and deposition agents, all with nice improvements in reduction in vines. Next slide, please. Try one more. And this is another example done by another agency. You see up to 5x more retention of the fungicide with a deposition aid in there. And these things are easy to see. This was done with the looked at with a black light, but you can see the difference that the deposition aids make. Next slide. And I think this was done on actually efficacy of them, again, with untreated versus Preaxor alone, and then Preaxor with an oil emulsion system. Again, a nice increase in or in reduction of the number of leaves affected, and makes a huge difference. And relatively minor investment in deposition aids can have a huge impact on performance. Next slide, please. Types of DRA and deposition adjuvants. The major ones are oil emulsions, polymers, and organic gum-based products. We probably should include now that in addition to the oil emulsion, there are some very nice surfactant-based DRA and deposition agents that could fit into this mix as well. They may improve the canopy deposition retention while reducing drifting fines. Established use in aerial for over 50 years. Some of the polymers have been used in air applications. So oil emulsion, polymers, and then the organic gums or guar gums. Next slide, please. Drifter deposition, what's the difference? I would maintain that there really is not. A deposition aid is a material that improves the ability of the agrochemical spray to deposit on the targeted surface, while a drift material is used to reduce driftable fines or off-target movement. So generally speaking, if it's a drift reduction agent, it's also a deposition aid. We will mention there's a change coming up. The ASTM, which is they establish terms and test methods for egg tank mix adjuvants. Driftable fines has been listed as droplets under 105 microns, and ASTM is currently in activity to upgrade that to 150 microns as a driftable fine. Next slide, please. Organic gums or plant-based gums from kelp, corn, cellulose, or guar. Guar beans are commonly used. They're viscosity modifiers that reduce the potential for water droplets to shatter and stops the production of small particles when applied through the nozzle. They may prevent droplet bounce as well, and that's one of the big key factors to this group of materials is the tackiness to them to stop droplet bounce and shatter, thus increasing retention. They usually require swelling of water before application. Many of them now come as liquids to eliminate some of that time factor. Generally, good spray mix compatibility, but use rate, blend time, and addition order must be followed on some of these products, and they may have some pH or spray component limitations on them. Next slide, please. Oil emulsion systems have also now been around for some amount of time. They can be of many types of oils. Paraffinic, MSO, or just straight seed oils are typical. Traditionally used for deposition enhancement down through vegetative canopies, but they also have the ability to reduce drift. The difference in these is generally they do not create larger droplets. They simply reduce the number of fine droplets. Generally, they're going to disperse in water wells, so you don't need as much agitation. And they do also help lower the foam potential because of the oil in the mix. Like others, they may have compatibility issues, especially with fertilizers. Next slide, please. And the last of them we're going to talk about were the synthetic polymers and resins. And these have been around for a long time. High molecular weight synthetic polymers that increase the viscosity. In other words, they were often called spray thickeners, probably not a real accurate term. The water and reduce the shattering of droplets into smaller particles. Commonly called polyacrylamides, alkyd resins, or polyvinyl. They've been used in drift reduction age since the 1960s. Available both as a concentrate that require vigorous blending or already pre-swelled blends ready to mix into the spray tank. Generally good spray mix compatibility, but the use rate and blend time and addition order must be followed. You don't want to overdose. That'd be the bottom line on these. Next slide, please. So what's the best one? And one size fits all is not very likely, especially in aerial application. The individual application determines the best product. Because of the wide variation of aerial nozzles and application speed, this is critically important with aerial applications. Product choice is often a balance between performance and ease of use. Getting your plane filled up and off the ground is a critical component of aerial application. So they'll often go with the easy to use mix in there when it comes to aerial application. So you can consider field application data and commercial experience, but often you're going to want to look at data actually through an aerial applicator. Formulation quality also impacts the performance and stability. So the real factor here is one size does not fit all at all, especially in aerial. And so you're going to need to, if you got your favorite drift and deposition aid, you need to work with your aerial applicator to make sure it's the right fit for his particular aircraft. CPDA is developing a performance certification standard around drift reduction agents. Next slide, please. Application mixing guidelines. Generally speaking, add emulsifiable oils last, making sure any, especially if you're using dries or powders or suspension concentrates, they need to be fully mixed in first before you put an oil in there. Generally, add the guar-based products first, fully mixing them in water before adding the rest of your spray components. And generally the same thing with the polymer concentrates. Get them fully dispersed in the tank prior to putting in the rest. Do not mix deposition DR products with undiluted pesticides or fertilizer. They need the water to blend first, or otherwise you'll be like those guys on the bottom dealing with a tank full of putty and gel and getting some nasty comments back on how your products are performing. I assume these are older pictures, Johnny, because I noticed I don't see many rubber gloves on any of these guys, but those are true pictures of that's what's in a spray tank, and that's a bad day for an aerial applicator. Next slide, please. Often fertilizers are used as a carrier because, again, we like to combine crop protection inputs in one application wherever we can. They do help in that they do slow, they're better deposition agents, and they slow the evaporation, and they add droplet density because of the weight of the fertilizers. And that's why many people like to use the fertilizers in here. Some fertilizers may form films that retain and spread the spray droplet. Ammonium fertilizers may also enhance herbicide efficacy. Next slide, please. Limitations of fertilizers. Biggest one is that incompatibility piece, particularly with oil and solvent-based components. They like water, and so poor coverage and retention is another factor. Also, often plain surfaces do not like some fertilizers, so that is the limitation. And then many herbicide labels in particular have prohibitions primarily due to compatibility reasons. So you do have to look at, even though we don't love to look at pesticide labels when they're going through air, you do need to make sure they're can be applied by air and what restrictions are around it. Next slide, please. Manage fertilizer and DRA incompatibilities. I've said it since I started my career, conduct a jar test. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often. But again, when you're dealing, especially with new chemistries and low spray volumes, you really need to do this work to figure out if everything you're putting in that tank is going to be good. Oil-based products should be added to the fertilizer mix last. And dry products must be fully dispersed, as we mentioned before you put in oils in tanks. DRAs may have prohibitions based on pH and components and incompatibility with products like boron and such. We run into problems there. So always keep that spray mix compatibility agent and have that, and that should go in the tank first, especially with fertilizer combos. Compatibility agent is first, so you don't end up with mixes that we see on the bottom. Next slide, please. Adjuvant product questions. Always think about what is the mode of action, oil, the polymer, or the gum. Is there data to support the product and the use rate, especially with aerial, again, because of the low spray volumes. You have to keep in mind that a 10, 15 gallon per acre rate of a DRA you're putting in there is likely different when you're putting it in 2 to 3 gallons of water. You also need to know what is the product shelf life. If a fungicide application, does the adjuvant need to be APE free? And this is to prevent arrested ear syndrome. And I think many of you have heard of that. It was first happened in I think back in 2012, 13, we had a huge increase in use of foliar fungicides, and they found that some adjuvant systems containing a alkyl polyphenol surfactant system help increase amount of arrested ear. So know what's in your drift and deposition agents and your surfactant blends before you put them over the top of corn. Is the product corrosive to equipment? You have to ask that. And then again, what order of addition should I follow? And are there any conditions or spray mix tanks to avoid? So, and again, a lot of this is around the lower spray volumes cause you more problems than what you see when you got 10, 15 gallons of water. Next slide, please. So overcoming the objections to adjuvants, and we cover this every time, but in aerial, it's probably a little more important. Again, the restrictions on the label. The question is, does the label doesn't require them? And this is a consistent and complete deposition with a minimal drift as a goal of the adjuvant use. If it's restricted, you can't use it. If it is not restricted, you still can use drift and deposition agent. I'm using a drift reduction nozzle. Well, on ground applications, that's half of the battle. In air, that's drastically different. And I think many of our aerial applicators are using deposition aids of some type to reduce that off-target movement and increase the coverage. The difficult to apply, generally speaking, that's not the case. By following the order of addition and use rate guidelines and mixing applications, problems can be minimized. But again, keep in mind that low spray volume, your degree of difficulty does go up. So you got to spend some background time working with your applicators to make sure they know how to do that. And then also the bottom line is often the question is of cost. I do not think that's a real factor. Generally speaking, the amount they cost is insignificant compared to risk of drift, and the maximization of deposition often costs far less than the cost of the adjuvant that you're putting into the tank. We proved that many times over that the cost is minimal with just the increased deposition. Next slide, please. So adjuvants do have an important role in aerial application. Hopefully we have covered when I should use them. Again, over and above the compatibility issues that we talked about in foam, the improved spray deposition is what we're really talking about here in every application. Always follow the label. Again, this is more important because in aerial, there's a lot more restrictions on the labels on this. And then strictly following the mixing order is extremely important. Always ask for and review the field data if it's available. What other practices improve application? Determine what commercial experience has been before blending a new spray mix. And again, we talk our whole career, but especially in air, conduct that jar test first. It's a lot easier to clean out a quart jar than it is an entire spray tank on an airplane or on a field tank. So that's critically important when you're trying new things. Make sure you know everything that's going in there and you know what it's going to look like. Next slide, please. Again, we want to thank you for attending today. All the people that are on, we really do appreciate it. We especially want to thank Brant for their support of the ARA and CPDA and today's webinar. So thank you for that. And here is your code for your CCA credit.
Thanks so much, Joe, and we apologize for technical difficulties. I think everybody's going through similar issues today, but we did want to let you know before you log off, the chat and Q&A functions are available if you want to ask questions please feel free to shoot those into the chat. Looks like we have one coming up. We're going to leave this QR code up. But Joe, if you're still on,
Yep, I am.
the question was how to access a copy of the slide deck. I guess that's up to CPDA if they want to share slides. These slides were put together by CPDA and their
Yep.
advisory council. If Terry or Joe,
Yeah, send an email on to Terry, Johnny, and I, and we can look. We're gonna look at what you're gonna use it for, but I assume we probably can allow some use of them.
yeah, and if you
Send-
don't have their
send a
email
note.
addresses, just email me, hunter@aradc.org, and I'll set you up. Any other questions or comments about today's presentation? Again, this webinar was recorded. It will be shared on the ARA and CPDA websites. So feel free to share those within your businesses. And we would like to see you on the webinar next time around. This will conclude this series of webinars with CPDA, but we do plan on doing more in the future. So you can go to aradc.org to view those past webinar recordings and share those within your companies. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your feedback and your involvement. Thank you to all of our sponsors for putting on such a great series. Thank you to CPDA. Thank you to Terry, to Johnny, to Joe. We really appreciate your continued involvement with ag retailers and trying to get some good messaging and education out there. Thanks so much. Have a
Thank
great
you
day.
very much. Have a great day.